Some Christians believe that the earth stood still for an entire day because the book of Joshua says so. The science, which I will tell you is fascinating. But the fact that a car would lift off the ground in under a second is not the point. But this story actually has a lot to say about what's going on right now. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. So right now, if you're standing on the equator, you don't realize it, but you are spinning. You are traveling with the earth at 1,037 miles per hour. And if the earth actually just stopped, wow. So basically what happens in that scenario is if the earth stops, which is the only way that the sun could stop in the sky, if the earth stops, everything that's not rooted to bedrock is going to continue moving at 1,037 miles per hour at the equator, a little bit slower as you move away from the equator. And that does incredibly crazy things. So the oceans would turn into massive waves. We're talking about, 50 to 100 meter waves, stuff that nobody has ever seen before. There would be no coastline, there would be no anything like that, because the oceans would be moving still at 1,037 miles an hour. And yes, a car would lift off the ground in under a second, but by the time a couple of seconds had passed, the car would just be the tires would rip off of it, everything would mangle and begin to come apart into small particles. So the 8-foot long average 2x4 that most houses are made out of, it would, if it's moving at 1,037 miles an hour, it would have the impact, the blast basically, of 46 sticks of TNT. That would have like a 200-foot blast radius, but that really wouldn't matter for the 2x4, because what would happen to the 2x4 is in about 2 seconds, or actually a little bit less, it would atomize. It would become tiny little shards and ultimately like sawdust that would be flying through the air at that same speed. And just think about and very intense sandblasting. But don't forget, it's everything. Everything is doing that. Everything is coming apart and turning into tiny pieces. This would be an extinction level event that absolutely everything, every person, every animal, every structure would be completely destroyed. But of course, this earth can't actually stop automatically on its axis and all of that kind of stuff. That's just not possible. So what's going on in this story? Well, what's happening in the story, it's in Joshua chapter 10, is Joshua is leading an army against another nation, and the other nation starts to run away, but Joshua prays that the sun would stop in the sky and that they would have more time basically for battle, and the sun stops for an entire day. This is actually not an unusual claim in that part of the world at that time. This was something that was said of other gods being able to do to extend battle times, and it was hyperbole, obviously. It was really just, talking about how strong that God was and how powerful that God acted on behalf of its army. But the bigger thing is that in the eyes of Joshua and his army, they were fighting for justice. They were fighting for all these really good and powerful things. And even when stuff seemed to be starting to change, they didn't want to stop. And that's what's helpful for today, because there are horrible things going on in the world. And sometimes what will happen is when things change a little bit, people will sort of feel like, oh, great, we've done what we needed to do. We can stop. And when we stop, it just sort of reverts back. So we have to have sustained resistance. And the sustained resistance is what happens. We need to have that same sort of idea that no, things are beginning to change, but we need to keep the pressure on in order for them to ultimately change. We need to try to get the sun to stop in the sky, metaphorically. Yes, we need to work through the night. We need to wake up the next morning and do the same thing. We need to keep a sustained pressure because we are working for a worthy cause. We are working for justice, and that is helpful for today.